Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today it is another ridiculous stunt coming from the British new elite, though this one really is focused more on the old elite, given that it is money coming from people who clearly had family with businesses during the slave trade times. Just for context, in Britain, that means people who had families who had successful businesses running all the way back through to the 18th century, possibly even to around the time where America was only just born as a country. Because America doesn't have history, so there's no point beating around the bush in this case, we may as well just get into it. Lloyd of London put up £52 million to atone for role in the slave trade. Yes, once again, the particularly nasty idea in Britain that you just have to pay black people because some of them were enslaved back in the 18th to early 19th century. That means that now in the 21st century, for some reason, you just have to pay random black people. Lloyds of London will invest £52 million in causes promoting racial equality after a research project set out its significant role in the transatlantic slave trade. An 18-month review by Johns Hopkins University found that Lloyd's was part of a sophisticated network of financial interests and activities that made the slave trade possible between the 17th and 19th century. The world's largest insurance market, which can trace its history back 335 years, was found to have insured the largest slave ship owners in the early 1800s, to have campaigned against the end of the slave trade, and to have dealt in risk policies for uprisings by the enslaved while referring to people as goods valued at £45 each. In other words, a large insurance firm acted as a large insurance firm in the 1800s. I'm not surprised that a company that was making money from the slave trade was against ending the slave trade. A lot of people were against ending the slave trade. Luckily, the pro-abolitionists won the argument, quite literally, by having the Abolishment of Slavery Act 1833 being passed through Parliament, thanks massively to the work of the abolitionists William Wilberforce and Olaudah Equiano, along with many more. But then after that, Lloyds of London didn't do anything illegal, as far as I can tell. But who knows, maybe the article will say that Lloyds of London actually did do something horribly immoral by the moral standards of the time, because at the end of the day, that is all that really matters. Because as people consistently say, why can't we then extort most of Europe for costing the British millions and millions of pounds during all the wars from the 17th, 18th, 19th and even 20th century? Or why can't we go even further back and ask the Nordic countries for reparations for the Vikings coming through and absolutely pillaging Britain? And then if you go even further back, well, the Romans came in and pretty much destroyed most of the Celtic tribes in England. Anyway, let's find out. One ledger from 1807 showed that one member of the market, Horatio Claggett, insured at least 59 slave voyages in the final year in which the trade was legal. Okay. Again, being involved in the slave trade gets very tenuous when you get to this level of detail. They were involved in the slave trade insofar as they were insuring ships that happened to be involved in the slave trade. Well, why would they differentiate any transatlantic ship? It's not illegal at the time, and obviously if you're a business, you're trying to make money. Now, obviously, we know now, we have decided now pretty much worldwide that slavery is horrible and should be eradicated absolutely everywhere it is found. But given that was not the zeitgeist at the time, again, just insuring slave ships, that apparently means you need to now spend millions and millions of pounds towards black communities. I just don't see the logic there. Lloyd said it would invest £40 million in communities and regions affected by the slave trade and provide £12 million for a programme supporting the recruitment and progression of black and other ethnic minority employees. Trust me, they don't need the money for that. There are plenty of recruitment agencies and companies doing that off their own back already. Bruce Carnegie Brown, chairman of Lloyd, said, "We're deeply sorry for this period of our history and the enormous suffering caused to individuals and communities both then and today." Great, well done. We are spending £52 million to virtue signal. Great, I hope you get the thanks you're looking for. I don't think many people were really asking for reparations. Really what a lot of these people are asking for is free money. Kahindi Andrews, the old chestnut that always demands more no matter how much is done for his cause. A professor of black studies at Birmingham City University, again, black studies just shouldn't be a course that exists, criticised Lloyd's after it decided not to provide direct reparations to the descendants of those who were enslaved. See, this is the problem with virtue signalling. It's never enough anyway. You're just giving away free money to get absolutely nothing in return. This won't improve your image. because absolutely anything you do actually worsens your image, even if you do everything Kahindi Andrews asks of you. Because the majority of Brits think, wow, you're really, really silly for just giving away free money like this. The slave trade happened years ago, centuries ago in fact. The issue was dealt with perfectly fine. Why are you bringing it back up again now? Whereas the other side, who are demanding reparations, they will say anything you do isn't good enough, so what's the point in doing any of this? Andrews said that the company's efforts amounted to reparations washing. He added, "This is PR, giving an apology, making some commitments, but this is not serious." It's £52 million, Kahindi. It's incredible that you can say that. £52 million that, in theory, are actually going directly to helping out, for lack of a better term, black communities. That still isn't enough to the Professor of Black Studies, the race grifter in chief, if you will. So what was the point of this, Lloyd? Literally no one thinks this is a good thing to do, even the people who demanded it of you. Junior Garber, co-founder of Equity, which provides recruitment and mentoring services for minority groups in the insurance sector. Oh my god, it still blows. Even though I've been doing this for years, it still blows my mind that there are dedicated companies that are literally just there as diversity grifters. It still blows my mind people pay for this stuff. Said there's no way to compensate for the damage that's been done. Too much has happened. Garber said that Lloyd's initiative were a good starting point. Lloyd, it's never going to be good enough. You've actually worsened your image by starting this. Because, as mentioned before, people like me are never going to give you business again because you're clearly just going to throw away my money. And the people you're throwing the money to, well, you've given them an inch and now they're going to demand a mile. And even when you give them a mile, they'll demand one more. In 2020, Lloyd's apologised for its role in the slave trade and has admitted it was the global centre for insuring the industry. Which, again, I really don't think is that bad compared to the people that were actually doing the slave trading. This year, the Church of England pledged £100 million to address the shameful wrongs of its links to slavery. I don't know why you'd pay £1 million for being literally the centre of the abolition movement. The United Nations said countries should consider financial reparations among measures to compensate for the enslavement of people of African descent. Well, I suppose all those African tribes who won wars in the 17th, 18th and early 19th century should get ready to cough up the money for the people that were enslaved over in Jamaica, America, and the rest of the West Indies. Oh, sorry, it's only white people that have to pay? Well, colour me shocked. Now, as usual with these stories, when one person or company decides that they need to virtue signal, then many, many other people in those circles, or companies in those circles, have to follow suit. And this is a case of Lloyd's following suit of many other virtue signallers. More than 100 British families pledged to make slavery reparations. Heirs of Slavery, set up by ex-BBC anchor Laura Trevelyan, of course it's an ex-BBC anchor, have been signing up descendants of plantation owners to help Caribbean countries. Because apparently the BBC is full of left-wing lunatics. And goodness knows who the other 100 British families are, but I wouldn't be surprised if half of them are involved in the BBC in some way. Heirs of Slavery was founded by Laura Trevelyan, a former BBC correspondent who pledged £100,000 of her own money to fund projects aimed at helping the descendants of slaves in Grenada, where her aristocratic forebears owned plantations. The Telegraph can now reveal that more than 100 British families have signed up to Ms. Trevelyan's campaign, including serving politicians, city traders and members of landed gentry. In other words, the exact type of people you would expect to throw their money away like this. And the thing is that if this was just framed as charity for lesser developed nations, such as Grenada or Jamaica or somewhere like that, I'd probably have a lot more respect for this. It's just the fact that they are advertising this as this is reparations, this is atonement for my family's sins. It's clearly just a virtue signal more than it is a I want to help my fellow man type act. So while good work may come as a result of this, I'd rather they just focus on the I want to do good work for good work's sake, rather than say it's reparations for slavery, stop making me feel guilty. It's the type of thing that's taught in the Bible, the kind of those that are praying in public and making it clear that they are boasting about praying in public are the worst type of people and are probably going to go to hell. And it's the same sort of situation here. These people are announcing, hey, we're going to give a load of money for slavery reparations, please call us good people. And quite frankly, they deserve to, one, waste the money, and two, be called even worse people for being so cynical about this. Speaking to the Telegraph in Grenada, Ms. Trevelyan explained this was the start of a growing movement, saying, over 100 have come to us, over 100 descendants of slave owners in the British Caribbean. Those are people who want to know how to support our work, how to research their ancestry, how to go about addressing this, and going about repair. I suppose at least the first words there were support our work, though again, the rest of it is all just how do I find out exactly how much I should give for the crimes that my ancestors have committed, and how do I go about repairing my reputation. That's kind of how the rest of that sentence comes across. It doesn't come across as how do I actually help people, which again should be the main goal of a charity, but it's clearly not. She added that there is all this momentum towards reparatory justice, whatever it means, in the wake of Black Lives Matter, is a question of how to channel all this moment and all this energy. And if we are to take the Black Lives Matter movement as a good example of this, it turns out that a lot of it is just going to be embezzled. In the UK alone, the woman who organised the Black Lives Matter movement to tear down the Edward Colston statue in Bristol has just been put away for over 2 years for embezzling £30,000 from donations to the Black Lives Matter movement in the southwest, and spending an awful lot of it on Uber rides and takeaways, along with other personal luxury goods for herself. Am I saying this is going to happen in the Caribbean? Well, it depends how well this particular foundation does, because if it actually tries to create and develop projects itself, it will probably do quite well. If it is just there to literally give money to the Grenada government, then I can imagine that it is going to be mostly wasted. Ms. Trevelyan, who has been in Grenada to observe how her own financial pledge might be spent, said, "It is no coincidence that wealthy families today are descended from those who gained their wealth through slavery." I mean, yes, it was an entire third of the transatlantic triangle. I am also not surprised that a lot of people who are born into wealth have some link to it. However, it's probably also worth noting that a lot of these families probably will have paid their taxes and probably even donated to the philanthropic work of the West African Squadron, who seized over 1,500 slave ships in their time working in the, well, West Africa and the Atlantic Ocean. She added that large families might need time to get their ducks in a row and decide what they want to do collectively. An inaugural conference of heirs of slavery is set to take place in London in November to help decide what the families will do. Again, they need an entire inaugural conference just to virtue signal that they are doing something about a evil and quite frankly embarrassing part of their history. I mean, just do the charity work. You don't need this conference to say, this is how we are going to atone for our sins. It's just public self-flattery to the highest degree, and it just makes you come across as cynical. This will be done to help the Reparations Commission from individual Caribbean states who will be asked to offer guidance on what form reparations could take and where they will have the most benefit. Funding for development has been a key demand from chairs of these commissions. And honestly, that's fine. If all of it, or majority of this money goes towards development projects that the Caribbean islands are actually going to maintain, then I am perfectly fine with that. I have no problem with helping other countries and people out that way. But my god, if they do this and then have a massive plaque saying this was donated by the Trevelyan family in reparations for their part in the slave trade, then again, you are just trying to use this as little more than a shield for your own embarrassment, which is the complete wrong way you should be going about charity. But we'll have to wait and see how that works out. But for the moment, they're taking a very cynical view on it, so I'm being very cynical about them. And the other cynical part of all this, though, is that when it does actually come to paying reparations and the British people's support for paying reparations, it's actually very lacklustre. For 6 months, you can have a government petition on the Parliament's official website. And this was the one called Pay Slavery Reparations to All Caribbean and African Descendants. We are calling on the government to compensate all African and Caribbean descendants so that we can move to a more equal society. Time is up, and if slave owners can be compensated for losing their slaves, the government should compensate the descendants of injustice the British Empire caused. And this was a petition that was put up during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement in Britain in 2019 to 2020. And even for the 6 months that this was open, they could only muster about 20,500 signatures, which quite frankly is absolutely nothing when it comes to petitions to Parliament. If they get to 100,000, it has to be debated in Parliament, and they couldn't even get that. They just managed to get a government response that was little more than just the Treasury saying, we already do put in plenty of money to the Caribbean islands in terms of foreign aid. And they also, of course, say that slavery was bad because everyone agrees slavery was bad. So the push to actually have reparations being put forward to Caribbean islands and Africa It's very, very unpopular in the UK, and I think that's because a lot of people in the UK, even though history is taught pretty poorly in this country, still know that we actually did quite a lot to help out slaves by literally creating a town in Sierra Leone called Freetown and freeing slaves there, which they were so happy about that they even funded a small arch near the docks that basically thanked the British for helping them be free. So yes, even though there's all these virtue signalers saying we're doing this for reparations, it's very unpopular anyway. So they are just doing it to up their own status with the other new elites. But I think the worst part of this is that even when charitable work is done, whether it's in the name of reparations or in the name of making a YouTube video, the people you are helping, while the commoners will probably be happy that they are actually getting some infrastructure funding being put towards them, the governments of these places actually do hate the fact that they do get help from, I mean, quite frankly, white people. Here is this week's example. American YouTuber MrBeast's latest video, in which he says he built 100 wells across Africa, has drawn a complex response online since it was published on Saturday. How building 100 wells across Africa that directly, positively impact 500,000 people's lives gets a complex reaction is beyond me. That is how clown world we are in. Some Kenyan activists and journalists say he has spotlighted the failures of the Kenyan government, while MrBeast, whose real name is Ginny Donaldson, appreciates that he will be cancelled following the reaction. The new wells will provide clean drinking water for up to 500,000 people in Cameroon, Kenya, Somalia, Uganda and Zimbabwe, Donaldson said, while an accompanying fundraiser to support local water aid organisations has raised more than $300,000 by Monday morning. In other words, one white dude from America who makes millions on silly YouTube challenges has managed to do more for the African people than the African governments who have had independence for over 3 generations at the very least. It's probably way more than that for most of these countries. And this work of philanthropy has a negative response somehow from the elites of these countries. It's actually incredible. And the same thing, by the way, will happen to the slave reparators. They will do all this charity work and the governments will say, they'll either say, we want more actually, or they'll say, well, this is embarrassing, we couldn't do this ourselves. So, while a lot of Kenyan activists were praising MrBeast for his work, there was an American charity organisation that didn't like MrBeast for actually doing charity work. Sarah Cabot-Jones, founder and CEO of Face Africa, an organisation working to improve water infrastructure and sanitation in sub-Saharan Africa, told CNN, "I've been doing this for 15 years, but we've been struggling to continue the work because funding, awareness and advocacy all take work." And then she added, overnight, this person comes along who happens to be a white male figure with a huge platform, and all of a sudden he gets all of the attention. It's kind of frustrating, but also understanding the nature of how the world is. She praised Donaldson for shining the spotlight of the need for clean water supply, but warned that the issue is sustainability. It's one thing to go in and install the well. It's another thing for us to go back to 3, 4, or 5 years from now and see that it is still functioning well. Well, that's up to the Kenyan government to keep the infrastructure going. I mean, really, to these people, it is up to the governments to start these infrastructure projects in the first place, and they're not doing it. But my god, a white guy comes in and actually does it? Oh my god, he is the devil personified. Anyway, according to Non-Profit Explorer for Face Africa, in 2020 they managed to make a revenue of $131,000 to only then spend a complete total of just over $83,000 on the founder and CEO and the program manager, field director and board member. So in other words, at the end of 2020 they had less than $50,000 to spend on actually making wells in Africa. So surprise, surprise, this is yet another charity that just isn't doing charity work very well. So to finish off, aspiring Kenyan politician Francis Gláeddyv criticised Donaldson's video, saying on X that it perpetuated the stereotype that Africa is dependent on handouts and philanthropic intervention, though Gláeddyw's comments attracted criticism of their own. Yes, of course, Kenyan politicians will and should be embarrassed by this because, frankly, they should have already put this infrastructure in themselves. Again, MrBeast effectively did this piece of charity as a meme. I mean, obviously, this charity work is, I'd probably say, less cynical than the reparations bodies' work because they're effectively trying to atone for a sin that, quite frankly, doesn't really exist. I don't believe in sins of the father. And MrBeast is obviously trying to advertise that he's doing good work and it gets clicks on YouTube to make more money. But I suppose at least with Mr. Beast, he's going completely around all the governments and the people who are demanding he do X, Y, Z with his money, and just going straight to the African people who say we need clean water and letting clean water for them. So that's, I say, the best way you could do this sort of thing. But anyway, there you go. If you're trying to do charity work in the name of reparations, not only are you being a complete cynical piece of work who has more money than sense, but also the people that you are trying to get positive status from will again just see you as cynical until you give them more money. So the best thing to do is just to not play the game. That would be my advice. Do charity work by all means, that's fine, just don't do it in the name of reparations. It is not a popular position, nor is it one that is going to get you any positive PR, so there's just no point. Well, with that, I suppose I should shill, so as usual, subscribe, like, become a channel member if you think my work is good enough. Tomorrow we will be having Laughing at the Guardian at 8 PM. We are going to be having John and Joz on from the Wellington Project, and we are going to have Josh from the Lotus Eaters on as well. So I hope you're all looking forward to that. But that's everything I had for you today for this video, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.